Thank you, Orly. I think my mum will be proud of your introduction there. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a phenomenal panel, so please can you join me in welcoming Minister Lemon from Portugal. Round of applause, come on up. Minister Carr from Canada, Portugal, Canada. Tamara from Tel Aviv in FinTech, and Sabrina from Switzerland. So we've got a multi-country panel talking about a very, very important issue. Many people ask, the whole internet, what is the greater good? And what we thought from this panel was to really start talking about how technology, how innovation can not only improve business, but can improve society. But before we begin, perhaps if I could ask each panelist to say a short sentence about themselves, and maybe a little bit of information that people don't necessarily know. There's two microphones over there. Minister Carr.
All four of my grandparents came to Canada in 1906 after the pogroms in Russia of 1905. They came from Belarus, from Odessa. They came with no money, no skills, no prospects for themselves, but a hope for their children and for their grandchildren. And here I am, more than 100 years later, representing Canada to you.
Hi there, I'm Ana Lehmann. I don't have such a diverse background. I'm boringly Portuguese, 100%, but I've been living all around the world. And at the moment, I'm in a political role. I have no backgrounds in politics, but I'm in charge of digital transformation, startups, and Industry 4.0. So looking forward also to share with you a great session.
Round of applause, come on.
Hi, I'm Tamara. I'm the co-founder and chief growth officer of Rise Up, a fintech company focused on getting lower and middle income Israelis out of debt and into financial health. I'm originally from the UK. I've lived in 7 different cities and decided to choose Tel Aviv as my city now.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Cohen-Dumani. I'm from Switzerland. I also have my parents who immigrated in Switzerland from Egypt after the war between Israel and Egypt. So I'm from a background of entrepreneur. They also came with nothing and they had to redo everything. I created a foundation, which is Nomads Foundation, to really focus on human being. As the director of Orange just said, I think in this new digital era, we should focus on human beings and on the life in general.
Thank you. Another round of applause. Right, the title of the panel is High Tech for a Better World. So I'm firstly going to ask you all, does the world need to be better, and what's wrong with it, and what should we change? We'll start with you, Minister Carr.
The world also has to be better, unless you think that we can't improve. And when we come to Israel and meet with those who are leading the way in innovation, you understand that better is not only possible, but better is a reality that we are seeing playing out in front of us. And better also means that as individual human beings, we are always enhancing our capacity to learn, to grow, and to collaborate. So if better wasn't possible, it would be a very sad day for all of us.
If we are all here, it's because each of us and all of us want to do their little bit to improve the world and to change something. And that's what I believe with passion. High tech can improve the world, and it's important that we do so. We don't have a planet B. We are pushing this world, the planet, to the limits, environmentally, socially, and even economically. There's so much we can do with tech. And this is what I believe. I think, for example, in terms of the enormous possibilities that technology can really do to our planet, be it artificial intelligence in terms of helping farming and counter climate change, wildfires. It's one example, and I finish with another example. Tech can really improve social inclusion. What's happening, for example, with education inclusion in Africa is a case in point, and we can develop it later.
I think it's my personal responsibility to use technology and to use my time and my energy in order to make the world a better place. I think that we've come very far, but the gap between rich and poor is bigger than ever. When I look at our customers, a lot of the things that we benefit from, here and in Rothschild Boulevard, are things that don't touch them. So there's a long way for us to go until the world is a better place.
I think nowadays we have achieved what the second industrial revolution has had as a goal. We live in a world which is more abundant than never before. We have less problem of health, less problem of poverty than ever before. But I think we have to ask ourselves of what is the society we want to live in. Because technology is a commodity. We should not focus on technology. We should really focus on the project of society. What is the world we want to build together? And what is the place of human being? And what type of human being? Is it a tech human being? Because we add tech everywhere. But is it the project of society that we want to build? I think it's not the project of society we want to live in. Tech should be a commodity to help us to achieve a project. But now, for me, to live in a better world means we have to set up goals of what it means to be in a better world. And to be in a better world is to share. And I think we have been talking about the sharing economy in the tech business very much, but it's not the sharing economy which is really sharing. It's still a capitalistic model which is really helping only a small amount of people and not all the world.
Thank you. I want to jump back to something that you said before, Tamara. You mentioned about, obviously, bridging the financial gap. And how do you think that startups, I know obviously your business is very, very focused on helping, financial inclusion and those things. And Minister, you mentioned it before. How do you think startups can improve the income gap between people, whether it's just directly like products yourself or spurring economy? Because I know every person here around this panel, we're all focusing on trying to create jobs, create that. I'm keen for people's thoughts on that. We'll start with you, Tamara.
I think that when you take an entrepreneur whose goal is to solve a problem, that's where you need to start. The problem should be a social problem. I met my partners. We decided we were a great team. Each one came from a different rich background, and then we went and looked for what social problem we could solve using technology, using a strong business model. And I think that that's got to be the way forward. Everything else is nice to have and should be encouraged. But it's very difficult to change the direction of a startup in order to include other people. It sort of needs to be in the DNA from the beginning.
Fine. And to the two ministers, obviously your large focus is economy, job creation, the digital economy. How are you seeing government's role in playing that, of creating job creation, which will ultimately improve the social divide?
That's why I'm here. And that's why I was in Thailand and Singapore the few days before I arrived in Israel, because Canada believes that to have a vibrant trading relationship with countries around the world will create wealth. We have conversations in government all the time about how we're going to distribute the wealth, but we don't talk an awful lot about how we're going to create it so there's something to distribute. And those who create the wealth are largely the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the creative people. So I have to justify to the people of Winnipeg South Centre, that's the name of the constituency that I represent, why I'm here. I could say the weather is beautiful and so is the scenery and the food is wonderful and the people are magnificent, but I need another layer of explanation, and that is that we are here to look at ways in which we can create wealth and jobs for Canadians. And trade industries are the ones where we have the best chance to do it. We're here to facilitate, you asked about the role of government, to have a public policy environment that encourages entrepreneurship, that is competitive internationally, and that leads the way to the entrepreneur and the business leaders to make deals with each other that is in the benefit of both countries involved. I'm here to talk about Canada's willingness to work with Israel and those around the world to have shared prosperity through job creation by trading with each other in the freest way possible.
Thank you.
Well, I very much share that point of view that government needs to implement public policies, but to facilitate and enhance the activity of the various stakeholders, be it the social innovators, the entrepreneurs at large. And I really think we should do that in a very open way. We are putting in place lots of policies, but not forgetting that we are not replacing other actors. And we can do it in a variety of ways. What I think we need to do is to bring the best, for example, in terms of industry, to increase value, in terms of startups, like, for example, I agree with you when you say that technology is instrumental, but we have to try to stimulate how technology can enhance the human side. How can we instill in our society also the values? And we have also a pedagogic way and anticipating the challenges of tomorrow. Unlike some more traditional type of politicians, I think long-term. And I think that's what we need to focus. But painstakingly, on a daily basis, and in a rather open and modest way, trying to create always the conditions to do so.
So I'm just going to jump back at you two then with another question of, so we're hearing about, obviously, DLD is the pinnacle of the startup events of the Israeli ecosystem. We're seeing lots of people setting businesses up in seconds and doing, so should a government act a bit more like a startup? Because, you know, I already mentioned before, my previous life I was in politics in the UK, and obviously governments, I can say, you know, sometimes a bit more cautious, slow, thinking of the electorates. And obviously now that I'm outside of that camp, do you think that that government should think more of how to rapidly change and innovate and create new opportunities and ideas?
Governments can only move as quickly as the people will let them move. And you talk about startup governments. Well, our governments start up every time they're elected or re-elected. So we have this little time in between when we have to prove to the people who elected us that we are worthy of another 4 years. And the way you do that is by showing that we have been true to the promises that we have delivered, and that we can demonstrate in a measurable way that we've improved the quality of life of people. Now, for example, we have signed a free trade agreement with Israel that is among the most progressive free trade agreements in the world. Only 10% of trade-oriented companies in Canada right now are owned by women. How much are we leaving on the table by not encouraging more participation from that brain power that traditionally has not been at the center of trading companies? So, along with our Israeli partners, we are committed, even in the text of the agreement itself, to promote the participation of women. And that is something I would love to be able to tell the people of Canada when we ask them for their vote 14 months from now.
Well, that's not an easy task, because we are always fighting between factors of rigidity, because I have to acknowledge that they exist, but for example at the Secretary of State of Industry we are very experimental, and there are different cultures within government, and of course we all want to push these objectives like my colleague Minister of Canada said, but it's not easy. But we need, if we really work in this area, we need to think in many ways like a startup, but also not forgetting what was just said here at the first session, that is startups but also contributing to the backbone of industry and to the economy at large. So that's one of the reasons why we are promoting the links between startups and established companies, including the so-called traditional sectors that are very innovative. So this is an example that shows that we need to think in a broader way, think like a startup, but not forgetting also the established sectors. And in government, I tell you, it's not at all easy, but we are managing to do a lot of things that are really experimental, and I believe in that if we want to think in the long term. But we'll be always far behind. It's so changing.
And jumping to Sabrina, you're in Switzerland, one of the most neutral places in the world, and obviously your organization is about bridging the gap with government. What do you see from the outside looking in of how government and how academia and other parts of the ecosystem can contribute to creating a startup society?
I think government should be a facilitator and an inspirer. We forget, I'm very happy to hear both of you because I think you are inspired and you can inspire others. And we forget that government are human beings, men and women behind. And I think, first of all, the thing we should do is facilitate the link and the relationship between all the players in an ecosystem. An ecosystem, we talk about a lot about ecosystems. It's a group of people living in the same region. And although the world is becoming globalized, the link between people who are living together in a small area is extremely important. As you can see in Tel Aviv, which is a very vivid and active and lively ecosystem, relationships between people are going very fast. It's a very collaborative ecosystem where people help each other a lot, especially in the tech. And I think this is something that I learned from Israel, that collaboration is key. And everything which can facilitate collaboration and help the connection to be speed up the connection is what we should focus on. Because nowadays, the key point is the speed. If you are not speedy enough, if you are not quick enough, you lose market, you lose ID, and it's not the ID which is important, it's the execution. And if you are not quick in the execution, you cannot do it. So what we have created with Nomads Foundation in Switzerland is a platform of co-creation, which with the aim of federating the most important player in certain verticals in order to help them to speed up the process of some very specific project, on-the-ground project. And we really believe that it is not, nobody now has the truth because we are in a new world. Everything has to be done. But we cannot do it alone. It goes too fast. So only by bringing many different people together, we can create collective intelligence. And in Switzerland, I think we are really a model of the collective intelligence from every point of view.
There's something else that government can do, and we have done it in Canada by investing almost $1 billion in clusters of economic activity that include AI, that include digital economies, and right across the country we are incenting the private sector to match these investments. So it's the way in which government can stimulate, and we believe that that kind of partnership will yield very good results.
And Tamara, your views on that, and also I'd like to ask you, from obviously being a startup here based in Tel Aviv, we're hearing a lot about diversity and inclusion. Are you seeing that this trend is improving? Obviously I know your focus is heavily on financial inclusion, but looking at the whole society's perception on how innovation is changing.
Well, first of all, regarding your point, everyone told me when I moved here that I was going to start working with Israelis. They said, "Oh no, don't do that. It's terrible. They're the worst." And I have to say that after 2 years and 2.5 years, I haven't had a bad experience at all, because it takes a second to adjust. Obviously, I'm English and I'm used to the niceties and the small talk at the beginning. But there's something that moves so quickly here, because you can finish a meeting in 20 minutes because you come in and you say, "This is what I want," and they say, "This is what I want," and "This is what I need," and that's it. You leave the meeting, you have 10 introductions to the people that you need the introductions to before you've even left the cafe, and it continues. Remind me of the other question.
How you're seeing diversity within the whole tech sector and how it's improving.
I think that the fact that we're holding this panel shows that there is a shift towards technology for good in Israel. I think that there is a long way to go, but when you talk to entrepreneurs, having a positive impact and trying to create a better world using their products and the specific problems that they're trying to solve, is something that we hear more and more about. So when we started 2.5 years ago, it felt like we were sort of the only ones talking this language. Now it definitely feels like there's a movement happening.
Great. Okay, so to all our panelists, we're going to start with you, Sabrina. We hear AI, we're hearing all these wonderful phrases, automation. Are we scared that this is actually going to be a risk to workers? Because obviously we've got two ministers sitting over here. We had 14 months. You've got an election. Canada has got a large manufacturing, to energy-based business. Are you worried that I'm going to come to you afterwards that automation is going to cause less jobs, or are we seeing that the rise of technology is going to create more jobs starting? Because I know you run your mobility hub.
Yeah. I think it's a key question. I think it will create jobs, but very different one. We are in a society where intelligence is key, and simple jobs, easy jobs are gonna change and shift. The problem is the speed. How fast is it going to change? And the speed is also a question of how fast we will be able to accompany all sorts of different type of employment, of jobs, into the new automation system. In Switzerland, in our foundation, we have launched the Mobility Hub. We have a few projects, very disruptive projects in hydrogen cars, for example, and we are working very closely with professional associations in order to include even apprenticeship in this new in this new shift. And how we do it? We anticipate the change and change already now the different training curriculum in order for the young apprentices to be able to be ready when the shift will be made. And I think we should really take the responsibility to anticipate the education. Because without anticipating the training, then the innovation will come and nobody will be ready to include the workforce in it. So we should really put public finance into program, into anticipating the changes.
Yes, totally agree. So really we have, without diminishing the huge challenges and the issue of speed that is absolutely critical, I tend to be optimistic. What we are observing, for example, in my country, is that automation and robotics and all this is coexisting with an increase of labor, of employment, and the qualification of employment. Our big challenge is really, apart from demography, that is our main challenge, is upskilling and reskilling of the currently employed personnel. And this is what really made us create a huge program, interministerial program called InCode 2030, because the huge problem that exists everywhere of lack of digital professionals. But we have also in the shop floor of the manufacturing companies a huge problem, and we are launching a campaign to bring back the prestige of working in a factory, and also the issue of apprenticeships and craftsmanship and all this. So the challenges are huge, but I believe in the fact that the humans still have a good edge on technology. Technology is instrumental and can augment, and I think in some cases technology can save us because we don't have enough people to support the current challenges. But the issue of upskilling and reskilling will always we will always be behind. And what we need also as governments to think is that we are insufficient. We need to facilitate, we need to inspire, to stimulate, but we are not agile enough. We need to act on those that can be more agile and forge partnerships with them.
Daniel, your question assumes a high unemployment rate because of automation. And in the future, we're going to have this problem of people being out of work. Actually, we've got the other problem right now. We can't find skilled labor. I was at an aerospace industry in British Columbia just 2 weeks ago, and they're turning down work, millions of dollars of work, because they don't have the workers who are skilled to do the jobs that they need to meet the demand. So our trick is to find people who are in industries where the employment rates are declining and retrain them to fill in the gaps in those industries where the demand is growing. So in addition to looking at ways in which we cope with automation, looking ahead in how we skill people up, anticipating as best we can the impact of technology, we also have an immediate issue of finding the skilled workers we need now in industries that require more people who are skilled.
But doesn't that then create a lag time? Because you're absolutely right. You know, factory workers who may, you know, everything's changing. Look, we're seeing now, we're going to talk a little bit about how the banks are changing. Used to be the bank was the only place you get money. There are startups, other things that don't. But how are you going to deal with the lag time? Because retraining a worker, and certainly a slightly lower skilled worker, takes time, and it's almost generational. You know, it takes a lot of investment. I know we spoke earlier, you were recently in Asia, in Singapore, one of the leading places that will make educational investments for the 10 years ahead. How are you dealing with, you've got to show 14 months' time that you've created more jobs and training? Is there some immediate impact? I know is it your Winnipeg consensus and your other stuff that you've done for that? Maybe give some examples how you've made quick impacts to the economy.
Well, maybe a good example is how we take advantage of this transition to clean technology and a cleaner economy in the energy sector to train and retrain workers to adapt to the shift from conventional sources of energy to renewable sources of energy, and how we take the brain power that's available to us and convert that into innovation on the ground. And we think that we can compete internationally by leading the way on this transition, which is inevitable and understood in every country. That's one small example. But again, on the ground, I asked these people who are turning away business because they can't find skilled workers in the aerospace industry, could you train a 50-year-old unemployed lumberjack to put cargo doors on aircraft? And the answer was, you bet we can, and we will.
Very good. Just one question on that. You began your career as a musician, and I understand you're a very accomplished musician. How's that background helped you with your current role now?
The relentless pursuit of harmony. Discipline, hard work, and creativity. And if I'm playing in a symphony orchestra, as I had the pleasure of doing for many years as a younger man, then it's not going to make sense if I'm playing rhythmically aside or dissonant from everybody playing next to me. So if I don't collaborate, I'm not creating music that people are going to want. So discipline, hard work, collaboration, creativity, and sometimes when you're standing up playing the oboe in front of 2,000 people, some guts and some nerve wouldn't hurt.
And then I think the next question I want to ask before I move on, what made an oboe player want to go and become a politician?
There's something that's very common about it, and that is the capacity to communicate. Music is a language, and if you are fluent in the musical language, then you can communicate with people across differences of language, of ethnicity, of geography. So the universality of the language of music and the capacity to communicate an idea or an emotion is not really dissimilar from standing up and trying to convince an audience that by using creativity, by communicating effectively with each other, we can make beautiful music together.
Thank you. Minister Anna, Portugal is in a way batting way above its weight in, you know, you've been able to attract some pretty big companies. What's been you'd say the success story over the past few years? You know, we're seeing Lisbon as one of the innovation hubs. You know, what's some of the magic sauce that's gone into that?
Well, it's not a magical wand. It's not only Lisbon. We have also the city of Porto that has even more startups and other smaller towns. But basically, the number one, and my background is in investment attraction, so talent is the number one factor, because we've been a very sort of hidden secret. And now these companies, when they have access to to knowing more about Portugal, etc. We have a very good value proposition because it's the talent and then a vast array of other competitive factors. And we managed in the last years also to consolidate quite interesting in our scale, of course, but even by international standards, an innovation ecosystem that helps us, and this includes a variety of stakeholders. And also we have very good ambassadors, be it startups that we attracted, be it large corporates like Google, for example, or many others. And this helps a lot. Also, the people that we have abroad are very good ambassadors. But Portugal, for example, we attracted also the Web Summit. It also boosted a bit our international image. But I believe that more intrinsic factors like the quality of the younger generation in tech helped a lot. We still have a lot of challenges, but it's growing a lot, and every day I get in touch with new investors, and it's very interesting that we are getting not only big corporates, but also startups from all over the world, and we really offer a very interesting ecosystem, not only to work, but also to live, and the millennial generation, as we all know, has different requirements, and I think they can easily relate to the lifestyle we can provide and the ecosystem we can provide.
And as a Brit whose country's about to leave the EU, how have you seen that the EU's impacted on Portugal's success? Okay, so you're eager to go and answer that afterwards.
Well, very, very much so, very much. We are deeply committed Europeans, and Portuguese market is too small. So really the openness of market that the EU provides is absolutely crucial, and also different other positive externalities. So as I said, this has been a critical factor. We also always had a very strong transatlantic relationship that we combined also with our heritage and history, also with our links with Asia and Africa historically, transatlantic, but the EU has been absolutely critical.
You wanted to jump in there on that?
Just from the side of the Brits, I have experienced from my friends a huge flood out of the UK and to the US. I think I'm the only one that ended up here, but I think it's going to have a huge impact on the talent that's left in the UK.
Just jumping in there, I wanted to ask you, obviously, how are you seeing, 'cause it's a huge issue certainly in Asia, Latin America, of the unbanked and underbanked, and obviously here your company's focusing largely on the Israeli market, but you've clearly seen a lot. How are you seeing that tech and innovation is solving some of these big challenges?
Well, first of all, technology has allowed to put people on the map of financial services that weren't on the map before. So that's especially the case in Africa and Asia, where it used to be that a farmer would have to take the day off work and go to the nearest city and go to visit the bank. Nowadays, if he has a cell phone, he can access all kinds of flexible and tailored to him financial services. So the first thing is access and putting people on the map. I think the second thing is that it allows people to understand their real financial situation and take control of it, take it in their own hands and decide how they're going to improve it. For example, Credit Karma is a great example of showing people this is your situation, something that is so complicated to understand on your own, and offering you different ways that you can improve it. What we're focused on is, first of all, allowing people to understand their situation, and then giving them flexible financial products in order to improve them. For example, a single mother who has 3 kids and is working full time to support them, if she gets a loan for 3 to 5 years, we know that there's going to be 1 month that even if she doesn't miss a day of work because she can't, she's not going to be able to pay it because life happens, and the kid's tooth chips or the phone cracks, and that's a place where flexible financial services can make a huge impact, because at the moment everything is cookie cutter. The bank says you missed a month, we're going to get a red light and we're going to send you to debt collection. And it doesn't need to be that way, because if you really understand who the customer is and their ability to repay, then you can be much more flexible and help them actually build their path out.
It's really inspiring when you hear how companies are focusing on solving the issue rather than just trying to deal with, the putting a plaster on a wound. We mentioned earlier, Sabrina, about looking at the whole concept of educating the next generation. And what's your view on how we can really get the next generation that lag time of understanding the digital world? And I think that's a question really for all panelists, how starting from the primary school education up, how we can really, invest in education for the next wave of technology.
It's a key question, I think. And this is the most important one. Actually, how are we going to transform education and school in general? Don't forget that school was created in the previous industrial revolution, mainly with the focus of creating a mass of workers to obey orders, and especially not to be creative. And now we have to shift. All the education system is based on fighting creativity. Although the children, we are focusing on creativity when they are in the earliest stage of education, but afterwards, when they are 10 or 11, we teach them how to obey, how to be a perfect worker, to obey the orders in order to be put into companies and again, to have a very small duty and to follow what they were supposed to do. Now, in this era, AI will do this type of work, automation will do this type of work, and human beings will have to be creative. If you look at the World Economic Report on the future of jobs, and you look at the skills which are required, the first one is agility. How to be able to sustain in this fast-changing world. It's certainly not waiting for somebody to tell you how to do it. And it's certainly not in following any type of order or in execution. So we have to really rethink the way we educate the children, the way we can educate them to acquire soft skills. And soft skills is the most important thing that AI will not be able, for the time being, not be able to do. So emotion, how do you deal with your emotion? How do you deal with your creativity? So it means that we have to teach the children to take the risk, be creative, continue to be creative, be persistent. I can see in the new generation, the persistency is really lacking. Most of the time, they are in a world which is very easy, which is made easy by the technology. But life is not so easy. And especially when you're an entrepreneur, you have to be consistent and persistent. So I have no secrecy, but what I know is that the Swiss system of education, the apprenticeship, is a very interesting one regarding the soft skills. I don't know if you know, but in Switzerland, 92% of the companies are less than 10 people. Most of these companies were created by entrepreneurs who went through the path of apprenticeship. So how do they learn to be an entrepreneur? On the ground, with another entrepreneur who showed him the way to take risks.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to ask each of our speakers when we're discussing this point to also give your final thought that you want to give the audience on high tech for good, as well as any comments about education, etc.
As an outsider who went to all-girls school in London and studied at Harvard, I want to to shine a light on the Israeli army. I think that in terms of education, the way that I see my partners and my team working, it's a different way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that is the opposite to what I learned, which is you come in, someone says something, and you say, I'm going to poke holes in every inch of this, and because I can, doesn't matter what level I am. And I think that that's a really, really important thing that is taught in the Israeli army and that schools around the world can learn from. And my final thought would be that I hope that there will be many more panels about tech for a better good in these conferences.
Orly, take note. Next year, invite us back.
No problem, Tamara.
I think we need to be fearless and move fast. It's quite clear to me that almost no one has a clue on, no one has a silver bullet. We need to work at all levels, from kindergarten to the people that are in their late 50s working, learning every day. Soft skills, very important, but I also believe in hard skills. What are very important jobs like data analyst, programmer, artificial intelligence expert. So we need to be balanced here. Balancedly unbalanced, maybe, is, if I can put it in this way. But we need to try. We need to try. We don't have silver bullets. And also thinking of the greater good. It's very important that we don't lose focus. We created the technologies. Technologies didn't create humans. And we can switch off things, we can program things, we can decide. We have a saying in our own lives, and we have to be bold and ambitious, and to be mission-oriented, and try to do something better in this world. And in this case, we have really not to lose focus that technologies are here to augment us, and we need to use them for our own good and for the common good.
Thank you.
In my parents' generation, it was very common that after high school or university, someone would get a job, and they would stay in that job until they retired. That doesn't happen very often anymore. People are changing careers every 5 years, every 7 years, and we can measure that, which reinforces the importance of teaching our young people how to think critically so that they have the capacity to make those changes and to adapt. And thinking critically means numeracy and literacy, but also the capacity to reflect. I really have only 2 rules in my office. One is that you can't have your devices going while we're concentrating on an issue, because I don't think the human brain has the capacity to focus 100% on 2 things at once. I know that mine doesn't. And the other rule is that if you are caught staring out the window, you get a free ticket to the concert. Because if you can't reflect, you don't know where you've been and you don't know where you're going. And in a world that is as intense and as fast-paced as this one is, we have to know how to reflect.
Thank you. That's a great way to end. Ladies and gentlemen, please give my panelists a round of applause for a great topic on high tech for better good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel Silio.